Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to the GoodPractice Podcast, a weekly show about work, performance, and learning. I'm Ross Garner, and this week we're asking how do I design MOOCs that people actually complete. I'm joined as usual by regular contributor Owen Ferguson. Hello, Owen.
Happy New Year, Ross.
How was your Christmas?
Excellent question.
A glimpse behind the curtain. It is still 2018 for us. And our special guest this week from Solera is Hannah Gore. Hello, Hannah.
Hello. Hi.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Hannah, MOOC completion rates have historically been incredibly low, and my sense is that some of the initial enthusiasm for MOOCs has kind of tailed off over the past few years. They kind of exploded onto the scene with the likes of FutureLearn, and then over the next few years, that enthusiasm waned, I think. Could you bring us up to date on what a MOOC is, first of all, please?
It's quite a political issue, actually, when it comes to MOOCs, because the concept of it is old. It's not as new as the acronym has been recorded as. So they're designed to be massive open online courses. It was an acronym that was given, and yet nothing within that acronym was actually defined. So massive was never defined. What is open was not defined. Online is pretty straightforward. Course, though, as well, is open to design interpretation. So what's quite interesting is that in the 5 years that I made MOOCs for the OU for FutureLearn, I got told quite a lot, it's a fad, it's over with, death by the MOOC, and I got told that probably every single year. But
From the start?
From the start, yeah. I mean, it was doomed from the start. So, it's this big thing that people are pumping loads of money into, and it's going to be over in a heartbeat. And I was like, okay, but the concept of free online courses has been around since almost the birth of the internet, because OpenLearn, which is also owned by the Open University, that I had the good fortune to also work on and create content for when I was at the Open University, it's had over 60 million visitors in its 11 years. And last year, they had 7.8 million visitors. And I think it's quite easy to go, we're not talking about it as much now, therefore it's dead. And yet, the truth of the matter is, and we academic people are very good at this, we like the next new shiny thing. And once we finish playing with said shiny thing and it's a little bit dull around the edges, we go on to the next new shiny thing. But the irony is, the learners are just picking up what we now consider to be a little bit dull. And they're now rolling with it, because 7.8 million visitors looking at free content online tells me it's not necessarily a fad, and that's one of their highest years. Actually, instead, with the new wave of austerity that we now have, with the rising prices in education, people are looking even more online. And the Open University was always the socialist answer to education. It let anybody through the doors without the need of A-levels to start over. And even then, in the rise of prices, they're looking at something else. They want to advance their knowledge, and it could be in a plethora of different subjects. It doesn't have to be that we're all going to become academics tomorrow in STEM subjects. It could just be, I want to understand David Attenborough's latest program a little bit more, and there's nothing wrong with that. So whilst there is the birth of new things, and when I was at a conference recently, they were talking a lot about AI and VR. That's the next new shiny thing. But how many people at home are going to do that right now? How many people at home are actually doing that in comparison to just 7.8 million people on OpenLearn alone, not including FutureLearn, Udacity, Udemy, Coursera, etc. So it's still moving as a concept. It's just not talked about as much. And I think one of the reasons why it's not talked about as much is the data issues around it, because the data is very closed in, and it's not talked about much because of the commercialization aspect that is associated with the common day, today's MOOC. And because of that, academics can't get to the heart of the data of MOOCs en masse. And it's very difficult. I was in a much easier position at the OU when I did my doctorate because I had access to the data. But Katie Jordan, for example, did a massive piece on data completion. And it took her a lot to find all that data. because it's not easily accessible. So you have to take it piecemeal from lots of different places. And so if we can't access it as readily, it kind of loses interest there as well for academics. So it's talked about less.
It's the classic. It's the classic pattern, isn't it? The moment industry influencers and early adopters have lost interest with something is the very point where actually a lot of the wrinkles and the kinks have been ironed out. It's actually becoming something that is increasingly useful for most people. So, and you see it, time and time again. The minute we stop talking about things at industry events, actually behind the scenes, those things are being used in anger. I would predict that we'll see the same thing with AI. At the moment, AI is, I think, relatively narrow in terms of what it can actually do. But those issues and the challenges that we're experiencing right now with it will be ironed out. But in 5 years' time, when it's commonplace and actually relatively easy to do, we'll have moved on to the next thing.
Exactly. It happens all the time in patterns of education. We've seen it with, when iTunes U came out, the idea that we could just download our education. When YouTube started having education channels, I mean, when I worked for the OU, I worked for their open media department, and I moved from project to project to project constantly. New ideas. And then when they go mainstream, we go, okay, it's in the masses now. Next new thing. Yeah. And it only becomes, and I hate the term, and a lot of people do, disruptive innovation. It's not disruptive when a couple of people in a room are thinking about it. It's disruptive the moment it goes mainstream. Mm-hmm. That's when it's disruptive. When the moment it becomes ordinary is when it's disruptive, because it's like it's always been that way. And in some ways, the concept of MOOCs now, it's had the big, massive exposure to the world, has kind of lost that sex appeal to academics, and we just talk about it less as a result. But the key findings from it are still relevant. What makes a good course is still very relevant to us. And the type of learning that a lot of academics got that worked face to face, and then discovered that you can't just transmit face-to-face into online. You can't just record a seminar going on at the back of the room and assuming that people online will actually find this engaging. And so they learned that face-to-face doesn't translate to online. And what they also learned as well, and which is key important to classroom students, you have to design the learning in the classroom as well. I've seen over the years, I come from a massive teaching family, so I've seen a lot of classroom experiences, and they don't design what it is that they are delivering to the people in the room. They just think, if I talk about this, if we do a little bit of engagement, and then we'll watch a video on it, and then we'll do a session where people talk. That's not design. They're not thinking about the learning outcomes. They're not thinking about the ebbs and flows of that 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour lecture. And so, if one of the take-homes is that people need to design things in the classroom better because people are now paying a lot of money for that, and online better, then that's a good thing. And they don't talk about that as much either.
Yeah. I wonder if the biggest influence that the sort of the explosion of interest in MOOCs has been is just simply better structured online learning experiences, because you start to see variations of it. So, if you're paying for a MOOC, classic, that doesn't fit the classic definition of a MOOC. There's one commercial variation of it, but organizations have started to take some of the approaches that are used in the open MOOCs and use them internally for much smaller groups. So it's not massive and it's not open. It's just a better structured online experience for people.
Yes, it really is important. It's something that's deeply neglected. For example, at the Open University, when I worked there, we made modules all day long online, but they could be a year in length. That is a very different design with face-to-face elements, blended learning, practice-based learning through TMAs, tutor-marked assignments. That is a very different experience to a MOOC. And when I started out in MOOCs, going about like 6 years now, and I did a lot of work looking at how Coursera were doing the MOOCs, how CMOOCs were working. MOOCs back then were 12 weeks in length. If I said to you now, spend the next 3 months learning a subject for fun, for free, all in your own spare time, you would think we are crazy. And I said to my director at the time, this is madness. And I defined that we should do them at 8 weeks in length. Like, chop off. I mean, that's 3 months is ridiculous. Most people can't stick going to the gym for 3 months, never mind an online course. So we started out, all our MOOCs started out at 8 weeks, and then I was reviewing the data, and then we chopped them to 4 weeks. And then we played around with the data and made them 3 hours a week for 4 weeks versus 4 hours a week for 3 weeks. Because weirdly, to the person, 4 hours a week for 3 weeks seems shorter than 3 hours a week for 4 weeks. It's still 12 hours. So we started playing around 2-week MOOCs. I looked at MOOC a couple of years ago, which was a 1-week MOOC. And so you do start playing around and evolving it, but it still carries the same banner acronym in its context. But it's forever evolving. It's forever different.
How are you measuring the success of the MOOCs that you were creating? Can you say that that certain things aren't working, certain things are? Because the MOOC completion rate is famously low. It's around 5% normally is the figure that you hear bandied about. So does completion matter, or were you looking at other metrics for working out how you were engaging users?
Well, I did look at completion data as part of my role, as part of my doctorate, and I did cite Katie Jordan's work. She looked at MOOCs across a range of platforms and came to the conclusion it was almost 15% on average. But you're talking a huge spectrum of MOOCs to get that piece of data. And when I worked for FutureLearn...
Well, that's so when you say, so it's completion, say average 15%, but that might be, one is 4 weeks and one might be a year-long program.
It's full of so many caveats as a piece of data, but it's an interesting piece of data if you break it down. So yeah, I mean, some of the MOOCs could be for credit, some of them could not be, some of them could be 1 week, some of them could have a huge celebrity with them. So you could have a lot of outliers with that data.
Yeah.
And when I worked for FutureLearn, they cut the data differently. So they cut the completion data from the number of learners that came back and started, not the number that are registered. So that then produces a different data set again. And I'm quite interested in the ones that didn't come back. I want to know why.
So they registered but never actually
started
the MOOC.
the MOOC. Yeah, so that data was cut differently. So when you look at MOOC completion data, the first thing I do is question, well, how the hell did they get to that figure in the first place? Because if you cut the data several different ways, I can get you a set of percentages.
What number do you want?
Exactly. We cut the data at Solera in one way, which is, of all the people in the platform since the dawn of time, what is the completion rate? And we currently sit at 63%, which sounds fabulous. And it is. I'm quite proud of it. But
depends what you mean by completion, though, doesn't it? And what triggers
fully completed the course. So they have to complete the course, all the activities, create the asset out of the course if it's an asset-driven course. So, for example, if we're teaching them how to, give presentations, they have to write a presentation as part of the activities, deliver it to their manager, and then the manager signs them off. Now, that's a very different set of people. I am writing and I'm designing a platform for a set of people I know exceptionally well. With MOOCs in the mass open world, you're writing for the masses. You're in this hopeful one-size-fits-all strategy. So for me, my doctorate it acknowledged completion data as a thing. I have to. There's a lot of research out there. But instead, I concentrated on engagement data within, because I wanted to understand what is it they found good within that MOOC. And if I can look at enough MOOCs, so I looked at 19 MOOCs made in a 1-year period by the same learning design team. And that was really important because when you look at MOOC data today, they're apples and oranges. You are comparing one in one university with another university far away with a completely different design team on a different platform, different length of time on a different subject. It is literally comparing apples with oranges. But this was the same design team on the same platform, presented at the same time for 3 years. So I looked.
Was this FutureLearn that you were looking at?
FutureLearn that I looked at, but only Open University MOOCs because that was the data that I could get hold of. Even during my time there, I couldn't get hold of the other data from the other providers. And I looked at the engagement data of 76 presentations of those 19 MOOCs over a 3-year period to look at on presentation of the same MOOC, what did they like?
A presentation being a instance of the MOOC.
An instance of the MOOC running. So in some cases, like Introduction to Cybersecurity, we had 8 presentations over a 3-year period. That is like, manna from heaven for a researcher, because you've got 8 instances of the MOOC on the same platform going out, and you're seeing, well, what did they actually really like inside the MOOC? So I started to look at patterns within, what they liked, which steps they visited the most, which steps they liked the most, which steps they commented on the most, because that's really important. What I learned is that as much as we would love them to, MOOC learners do not follow a linear path. They really don't. They see it, though free, lovely, but they're still aware of their time, even though it's free, and probably more so because it's free. So there's like this scale of,
it lacks value to an extent if you're not paying for it.
I want to read my kids a bedtime story versus learning about exoplanets. Like which one am I going to do today?
The exoplanets.
My cat's got a furball. I need to take it to the vet, versus learning about nuclear fission. It's just like you make a judgment call every single day. And so what happens is that, especially in Future Learn, because you had step titles, you could look at the step title and decide before going in and going through next, what is it I'm going to do? And so what I actually took home from my MOOC, and one of my contributions was for my doctorate, was that step titling is actually really important in learning design, yet has never featured in learning design before. We talk about content within all the time. We talk about learning taxonomies. It's got to be this type. It's got to be assimilative. It's got to be communicative, etc., etc. They've got to do a bit, read a bit, see a bit, etc. We're never actually going, well, how the hell are they actually getting to that step in the first place? They're not clicking next. They're going with the title.
Do you want to explain, what step titling means?
Step titling could be, for example, starting off a diplomacy MOOC. You could have the step title, Introduction to Diplomacy. This seems like a standard, pretty normal title that you would write. Change the title to What is Diplomacy? ? You will have more visitors. It is clickbait. And we have to, in some ways, think about the clickbait to get people through into the steps, the sex appeal of the titling of the steps. And so what happened was I looked at over 1,500 step titles over a 3-year period for my doctorate, and 62 of them, which is not a lot out of over 1,500, came up time and time again in every single presentation in the top 10 most steps commented on, liked, and visited. And of that, 25 of the 62 had a rhetorical question in the step title. So what it showed was people were clickbait oriented. And in today's world, you see it on social media, you see it in Twitter, you see it in paper headlines, in debates. And you think, people are hardwired to respond to clickbait. So we have to consider that as a concept when designing something, because a MOOC is like a recipe book. And at the end of the day, it has a celebrity chef. We've written it in a linear order, starters, finish, desserts, appetizers. We've given them a pretty picture. We've told them what they need. We've told them how long it's going to take. We've broke it down step by step. But have you honestly ever bought a cookbook and actually cooked in order of that cookbook? And have you honestly ever then cooked everything inside that cookbook? Or did you go to the picture you liked the most, the title of the recipe from the contents that sounded the most exciting, the one that you could impress somebody with more? And you see it in titles of recipes now, the kind of clickbaitery.
You won't believe how succulent this chicken is.
Exactly, succulent chicken or naked salmon, or it's in there in titling. The way that they describe chocolate desserts. You only have to watch Nigella to see how she describes a chocolate dessert. And then you've never actually going to make this chocolate dessert, but you're hooked. And so that's how you decide on that recipe.
So that raises an interesting point there, because a lot of what we're talking about is taking a marketeer's approach, or even a kind of
trashy journalist
media. Well, no, a media approach.
Yeah, not even trash. Yeah, just any media.
But it's a a media-oriented approach. And a lot of what we're talking about is engagement within the MOOC itself. To what extent are people looking at the actual impact that those are having? Because it's from a corporate learning perspective. Whilst it's great to have people engaged in something, what you're really interested in is whether you actually do something. So the Nigella example that you gave there, which is great entertainment, but in actual fact, you're not going to make that chocolate cake and it looks a little bit too complicated or whatever it might be. Like the actual impact of that is it's an entertainment piece rather than something practical. And there is a sense that to what extent are MOOCs there? It's almost like another form of entertainment. People do like to learn. People are learning machines. Some people are learning stuff just for the sake of learning it without having any intention whatsoever of doing stuff with it. So from a corporate learning perspective,
you have to pay for it. Like the corporate is paying for it, basically. And so what you're getting back on that investment.
Yeah, with a corporate, it's very different. So
and you're in a corporate now, we should say.
I'm in a corporate now, very much a corporate now. So when I worked at the Open University, my objectives were around, make this many MOOCs, look at the data, etc., etc. That's nice. In my corporate now, my objective, my mission, as it's known inside my company, is that I have to deliver double-digit growth to the company in sales. Now, you're sitting there going, well, I'm not a salesperson, I'm an L&D person. But for me to do my job properly, for the learners to do what they need to do to become high-performing members of staff, they have to deliver double-digit growth to the company. And so, therefore, it's also my mission. So it's not your usual, mission objective for an L&D person, but it's hardwired to the company's values. And that really trains your mind, because I'm only making courses that will deliver double-digit growth to the company. I'm hardwiring down to the soft skills we need to become better salespeople, better communicators, better marketeers. I mean, I could write a bunch of really lovely stuff, but it's going to be no good to the company. So it's hardwired in a different way. I was able as well, I attend the SMT meetings for EMEA. I work for the European, Middle Eastern, Australasian division of the company, and I attend those. And so they are hardwired then to go, okay, we're doing, for example, a product launch in another country. How can the business school help us do that product launch? And it's about training the staff about the product, how to sell the product, how to talk about, how to pitch the product, how to write a value proposition on that product, how to spot an opportunity for a client for that product. And so I'm hardwired into those meetings. And
how do you sorry to interrupt. How do you divorce what you're doing from say the innate skill or experience of the salespeople? How do you measure your impact in particular?
So my impact is measured through, we measure it in the usual ways of completing data and surveys and all that sort of thing. We do interviews with the staff, interviews with the managers. That's probably incredibly crucial to the success of the business school, because the checkpoints, so the examination points for each individual course are not signed off by the business school, they're signed off by the managers. And then the end checkpoint is signed off by the business school, because I'm hardwiring it into the manager's belief that they are key to their staff development in their team. And it is not enough to send them down a corridor and go, off you go watch a presentation about how people present. This is not going to make you a great presenter. But it's also not enough for that manager to turn around and go, I don't know why they didn't get the contract, I wasn't in the room. That manager has to know how that member of staff is performing in front of their clients. So by making the manager part of the process, forces a situation in which they have to take ownership of their staff.
Do you get resistance to that?
There was resistance at the start on the basis of, have I got time for this? I'm really busy. The glorification of busy is something I've presented on in the past, and you can imagine my views on that. But it's all about, do you want double-digit growth or not? Do you want high-performing members of staff or not? Do you want to develop your staff to be better team members, more efficient, out with the clients? Clients are happier with them as a result, or not? Because how that team performs is a reflection on you as a manager.
Yeah,
and so it's hardwiring it back to them and understanding why is it important to them. And I'm measured on that as well as all their Salesforce sales figures.
And so, and the closer aligned the intended outcome of a particular learning intervention is to what actually matters to those managers, the more likely they are to be engaged with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And what you explain to those managers is, well, if you start taking the management courses and your manager has to sign them off. So it's not that the buck stops with you as a key account manager for your field staff. The global account manager also is involved in your development, and the regional director is involved in the development of the global account managers, and you just show them how the chain works. And it's something I call socialism L&D, is that it's a grassroots movement, and it works much better and stronger than a top-down kind of approach, which is quite standard. And it's about understanding what the staff need and having a skills assessment of the staff and meeting the staff. It is not enough to go, do you know what, we need some communication courses, I'm just going to buy some in, from a person who wrote them that you've never met before, who's been contracted by a company that you've never met before, and think that that's going to work. You have to understand good learning design to adopt and remix, which is in the heart of open online courses and OER for quite some time, and remix that content and work it for your company. I'm not against buying in content, but buy it in and then tailor it to your company, because otherwise you are no different. You are not unique. You're not standing out in the competition in your sector if you're not thinking about that. And understand where the strategy is for the company. Where's the company going in the next 5 years? And if you ask a lot of L&D people, where's your company going in the next 5 years, not where your department is going, can they answer that question? You know, have they been reading those missions? Have they then been going to that director that wrote that strategy document and gone, I can help you here. You know, this is what we can deliver. Let's start moving this and stop being the nice to have conversation as part of an appraisal. Personal development is not a nice to have, it's a need to have. And especially in a fast paced growing market that is highly competitive, you have to put it at the fore. So it's about understanding what the company needs and making sure that your objectives, strategies, courses, platform align with that. Otherwise, it's not successful and it's not adopted. You know, if they don't see a gain, it's not adopted. Now I have a situation where I'm actually snowed under. It would be ironic if it was snowing right now, but well, it's New Year, so probably not.
What a wonderful white Christmas we had, though.
Yeah.
As I think back on that day.
And so you've got to really work hard at this to make it relevant.
Let's wrap up on some of the practical things then that people can do, because we've only got a couple of minutes left on this. So one thing is to look at the titling throughout. What else have you found that is key to driving engagement?
Okay, so ways to drive engagement is about delivering content that your company needs, that your staff need, having grassroots socialism in L&D, so understanding the people that you are developing content for, what is their needs, what is their skills gap, and understanding the strategy of the company, its mission, and that's how you shape your L&D. And then within that, look at the engagement data within. Don't just look at completion data. Look at engagement data within, what worked, and most importantly, what didn't work, because that's also a key driver as to why completion data is lower. What didn't work, and how can we address that, and understand what worked where well. It isn't always the case that you go, oh, this really works in this type of course, let's translate it into this one. It's different courses work in different ways, different activities work in different ways, and you have to be looking at the engagement data within to understand that.
Yeah, and that's particularly important to look at, because if you're aligning your learning intervention with both purpose of the organisation and what matters to the individual employees, and there's certain things that are not working, you really have to ask yourself, what have I managed to do to turn these already engaged people off as part of that?
All right, let's leave it there, and we'll move on to a regular feature of What I Learned This Week, where we share something we've picked up over the past 7 days. Owen, do you want to go first?
Sure. The Wall Street Journal has got an amazing interactive looking at China's trade with the US over the last 40 or so years. So it's got this range of charts and animations to show how China has shifted from being a predominantly low-tech manufacturing country in the 1980s to a much higher mix of high-tech today. And what's interesting is they've not really switched from one to the other. What they've done is they've maintained their position in low-tech goods, and they have added in high-tech as time has gone on. So little snippets that you kind of pick out of it, like they produce 80% of America's imported Christmas decorations. They produce almost 100% of their artificial flowers and fireworks, while at the same time they have grown their proportion of office machines and appliances and phones to where they are the dominant importer in the States. So they overtook Japan for high-tech imports to the US in 2003, and the value of their high-tech imports to the US exceeded the value of their traditional manufacturing in 2011. And it's just incredible to see in a really visual way how a country has completely transformed its economy, and it's well on its way to becoming the largest economy in the world. You can absolutely see why that's the case. It is both inspiring to see how that kind of transformation has happened, and also slightly terrifying how efficiently they've done it as well.
There's I read an article a few months ago. I'll try and dig it out and put it in the show notes, but it was about a village in China where kind of every home was focused on a different Christmas decoration, and everyone in the home, they all had little bits to do to, like they had to screw on the Santa hat, or they had to, I had no idea how you make Christmas decorations, obviously, but you get the idea. And that was all they did all year round, and was made massive volumes of these, and then they went to sort of a massive wholesale kind of like the local trading centre, and sold hundreds of thousands of these things. It's
like Adam Smith Pin Factory.
Yeah, exactly.
It's microcosm exactly of it. That's amazing.
Yeah. Hannah, what have you learned this week? This glorious first week of 2019.
Yes. Wow. If I dig back to a recent tweet in late 2018 from David Hopkins, who's been a colleague in my field for quite some time, and he tweets out quite interesting stuff. And I saw one that caught my eye when I was looking through Twitter this week, a few weeks ago. Was one on, there was 11 papers about children's understanding of their data and online privacy. And it stopped me in my tracks because I work in adult education and have for a really long time. But I thought, I haven't ever considered how children see the internet. And obviously they're going to be my learners tomorrow. So I really need to think about that today. And what I found quite interesting was how they understood privacy on the internet. And it was quite disturbing in some ways, and it actually resonated with adult use. So, for example, there was a really interesting little caricature picture of a kid later on in life, and an older person went, I feel like I've known you all your life because I've watched you from birth on Facebook. And it's because their parents have got Facebook accounts from their kids' birth onwards. And what was quite interesting was there's a really amazing soundbite in the article. And then it lists these 11 papers, and each paper was interesting in its own way. And they said that children are canaries in the coal mine of the digital age. And instead of doing the usual digital native thing that a lot of academics really poo-poo, and they get really wound up by that phrase really stuck with me, because I thought, yeah, everything we do has a massive impact on them, and also resonates quite a lot with some adults today and their understanding of privacy on the internet. So I took home quite a lot of, it's extensive. I mean, there's 11 papers to go through, but there's a synopsis of each, which really does help if you're skim reading, about their understanding, and then how can I help with that in what I do now. So that was my take home for this week.
Well, we will put a link to that in the show notes, and then anyone who's interested can see that there. I'm also going to touch on online privacy. This week I was reading Splashdata's list of the worst passwords of last year, 2018. And so I'm going to perform a public service and let you all know what the top 10 passwords were. This list is based on 5 million passwords that were leaked online last year. So if someone at home has one of these passwords, it's probably time to change it. Oh, you're laughing as if you know what's about to come.
Is it because it's all his password?
Okay.
So at number 10, a non-mover from last year, it's I Love You. At number 9, down 5, it's Old Classic QWERTY. At number 8, a new entry, Sunshine. Well done, Danny Boyle. At number 7, up 1 from last year, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. New at number 6, it's 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. At number 5, unchanged from last year, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At number 4, down 1, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In at number 3, and up 3 from last year, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At number 2, a non-mover, the word password. And at number 1, in its 6th year at the top, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I am exhausted. I'd like to thank Hannah for taking part today and everyone at home for listening. If you'd like to get in touch with us about anything we've said, I'm totally out of breath. You could tweet me at RossGarnerGP. You can tweet Owen
at Owen Ferguson.
You can tweet Hannah
at HR Gore.
And you can also tweet at GoodPractice or at GoodPracticeAUS. For more from us, check out goodpractice.com. Hannah, do you want to mention anything? Plug anything?
Plug anything? As it's just the new year and it's just around the corner, I will be at the Learning Technologies 19 conference talking about owning data in L&D.
Lovely. Next week, Ross D is chatting mentoring with Margaret Burnside. To make sure you don't miss it, subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please do leave us a review to help us kickstart our 2019. Until next time, bye for now.